David pulled up to the small two-story house just after sunset, his tires crunching over the gravel driveway as the last light of day bled away into a purplish sky. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the occasional hum of a passing car in the distance. He stepped out, the cool air brushing his face, and noticed the front porch light was off, unusual for this time of evening. He adjusted his coat, keys dangling in his hand, and approached the door, feeling that strange, unexplainable tightness in his stomach. The wooden boards of the porch creaked under his weight, and his eyes briefly wandered over the welcome mat, faded and frayed from years of use. He reached for the doorknob, expecting it to be locked, but it turned easily in his hand. That wasn't right. She always locked the door. His brows furrowed as he stepped inside, greeted by a faint, sweet scent in the air, something floral but mixed with a trace of something warmer, perfume and candle wax maybe. He shut the door softly behind him, the sound muffled in the stillness, and slipped his shoes off out of habit, though a creeping unease had already begun to settle in his chest. The living room was dimly lit, the only glow coming from a single lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the couch and coffee table. David's eyes moved over the room slowly, taking in every familiar detail, yet something felt different, like an object was out of place but he couldn't pinpoint it. A sweater, not his, lay draped over the armrest, and next to it, a half-empty glass of wine rested on the table. The television was off, but a faint hum, almost like distant music or voices, seemed to come from somewhere deeper in the house. He stood still for a moment, listening, trying to decide if it was real or his imagination playing tricks. His gaze fell to the floor where a faint trail of something, maybe rose petals, led toward the hallway. He almost smiled at the thought, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. She had never done anything like that for him before. He stepped further into the room, his foot brushing against something soft. Looking down, he saw a small, worn teddy bear sitting upright in the center of the rug. It was brown, with matted fur and one ear slightly bent forward, as though it had been well loved in another lifetime. In its paws, it held a bright red fabric heart, and stitched across the heart in neat white thread were the words, "I love you forever." David crouched down slowly, picking it up and feeling the soft weight in his hands. The stitching looked fresh, not like something old from a box in the attic. A knot tightened in his throat as he turned it over, searching for some sign of where it had come from. It wasn't familiar, not from their home, not from the shared memories. He placed it gently back on the rug, his mind turning over questions he didn't want the answers to. That sound again, louder this time. Laughter, light and unrestrained, a kind of laugh he hadn't heard from her in years. It drifted from the hallway like a faint ribbon of sound, carrying with it something else, music, slow and romantic, playing from a speaker somewhere in the back of the house. David's heartbeat quickened, each thump echoing in his ears. He straightened, his body tense, his hands instinctively curling into fists and relaxing again. He told himself there was probably a harmless explanation, but the thought rang hollow in his mind. The hallway stretched ahead of him, narrow and lined with framed photos, their wedding day, vacations, little snapshots of a life they had built together. Each step he took past them felt heavier, like the smiling faces in those frames were watching him, silently judging, silently warning. The closer he got to the end of the hallway, the clearer the music became, along with low murmurs that rose and fell like waves. A flicker of golden light spilled out from a partially closed door on the right. He stopped in front of the door, the wood warm under his fingertips from the heat of the room inside. The murmurs became words now, though he couldn't make them out completely, a mix of her voice and a man's, weaving together in a tone that felt intimate, almost secret. His pulse pounded harder. For a moment, he thought about walking away, leaving the house and never looking back, sparing himself from whatever truth was about to hit him. But something deep in him needed to see, needed to know. He pushed the door open slowly, just enough to peer inside. The first thing he saw was her, his wife, sitting on the edge of the bed, hair loose, face flushed in the soft light. She was wearing a dress he'd never seen before, deep red, clinging to her in a way that felt deliberate. The second thing he saw was him, the other man, seated beside her, close enough that their knees touched, his hand resting lightly over hers. A bottle of wine sat open on the nightstand, 2 glasses half full. For a moment, David's mind refused to register the scene. His breath caught in his throat, his body rooted to the spot. The music swelled around them, drowning out the silence in his chest. She looked up, eyes widening in surprise, the color draining from her face. The man turned slowly, his expression unreadable but not apologetic. David's hands trembled at his sides, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the doorframe. "What is this?" David's voice came out hoarse, low, almost unrecognizable to himself. The question hung in the air, unanswered. She opened her mouth, closed it again, glancing at the man beside her as though searching for words. The man leaned back slightly, his hand slipping from hers, but his gaze remained steady, meeting David's without flinching. David's eyes darted to the teddy bear in the corner of the room, resting neatly on the dresser with that same stitched heart. It was the same one from the living room. Had she moved it here? Or had there been 2? His mind raced through the possibilities, each one twisting tighter in his chest. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. The faint crackle of the music speaker filled the gaps where words should have been. She finally spoke, her voice soft, almost pleading, but the words blurred in David's ears. His focus tunneled to the man, the stranger who sat in the space that had once been his. David took a step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. The man shifted but didn't stand, his jaw tightening. She stood quickly, moving between them, her hands raised in a calming gesture. "Don't," she said quietly, but the word only fanned the fire in David's chest. Memories flashed. Their first date, the vows they had exchanged, the nights spent talking until sunrise. All of it now seemed fragile, like glass already shattered before it hit the ground. His throat burned, not just from anger but from grief, raw and aching. David's hands twitched at his sides. He could hear his own breathing now, ragged and uneven. She was still talking, but he barely heard her, his gaze fixed on the man who finally rose to his feet. They were close in height, close enough that David could see the flicker of tension in the man's eyes. "This isn't what it looks like," she said again, but even she didn't sound convinced. David let out a bitter laugh, short and humorless, the sound foreign to his own ears. He stepped back suddenly, the weight of the room pressing against him from all sides. His chest felt tight, his legs heavy. The teddy bear's stitched heart flashed again in his mind, the words now tasting like ash. Without another word, David turned, stepping out of the room and back into the hallway. The photos on the walls seemed to watch him again, but now the smiles looked mocking, hollow. The music faded behind him, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. His coat hung limply over his arm, his shoes still by the front door. He slipped them on slowly, mechanically, each movement feeling both urgent and impossibly slow. His hand lingered on the doorknob. He wanted to turn back, to demand answers, to tear apart whatever lies had been built here. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he opened the door, the night air rushing in to meet him. David stepped outside, the gravel crunching under his shoes as he walked toward his car. The porch light flicked on behind him, whether by her hand or some automatic timer, he didn't know. He didn't look back. The teddy bear stayed behind, sitting quietly with its stitched promise, in a house that no longer felt like home.